Are you thinking about going on or leading a short-term missions trip? Today we'll learn from a pastor who has led many short-term mission trips for adults. He'll offer some really practical tips for you and your church to prepare for and then follow up a short-term missions trip. We are so pleased to welcome you to this, the first episode of the Global Missions Podcast.
Welcome to the Global Missions Podcast, a podcast for Christ followers who want to participate more effectively in God's work both at home and to the ends of the earth. Visit us at globalmissionspodcast.com to find show notes, resources, and previous episodes. Here's your host, Rob Magwood, better known to his friends as Mags.
Hi everyone, we are so glad that you've joined us to begin this adventure together on the Global Missions Podcast. My name is Mags, I'll be your host for these interviews, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. Our guest is Pastor Lyall Mix, and our topic is short-term mission trips for adults. Just before we get to that interview though, we'd like to share with you this resource.
Have you ever wondered about the risks and the suffering that international workers experience overseas? Ever wonder how you can support and encourage them from Canada? Keeper Care is an annual conference held at Ambrose University, and this year they'll be discovering more about the realities and the impact of risk and suffering in the international context. Visit globalmissionspodcast.com today to register for this great conference. And now, here's our interview with today's expert guest.
I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. My guest is Pastor Lyall Mix. For those of you that haven't met Lyall, he is husband to Julie and a father of 3 grown kids and has served as associate pastor of West London Alliance Church since 1997. 18 years now, Lyall.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's very good. Lyall has a heart for God and for God's people. And as we'll discuss today, he also has a significant interest in God's work around the world. Mm-hmm. Lyall is actually a transplanted Westerner. We both live in London, Ontario now. But before coming here, Lyall pastored in Red Deer and Stettler, Alberta. So something else we have in common is Lyall is a loyal Edmonton Oilers hockey fan.
Amen.
It's been a bit of a tough stretch for us all.
Oh, I'm telling you.
Lyall.
It's tough.
But we're hanging in there.
Well, we are, but it's tough.
In your role at West London as associate pastor, Lyall is responsible for life groups, for the small group ministry, for the seniors ministry called Evergreen, and marriage ministries, as well as adult global missions trips. And this is going to be the focus of our discussion today, of course, and I've appreciated your friendship and very thankful that you have accepted our invitation to be interviewed today.
Well, thanks, Mags. I really appreciate being here and look forward to what God has for us as we talk today and get talking about the short-term mission stuff.
Very good. Well, just before we talk specifically about short-term missions for adults, give us just a little bit of your backstory, how the Lord has brought you to this point, and particularly your interest in global ministry.
Yeah. I grew up in an Alliance church. Mm-hmm. If you know anything about the Alliance denomination, it's the Christian and Missionary Alliance, so very much a heavy flavor of missions in my home church. When I was a young kid, we had the missionary conferences, we had missionaries coming in. My church was actually, for a small church, we had a lot of people that went to the mission field or are in full-time ministry. It's kind of uncanny, actually, but it's been very exciting to see how God just raised a whole bunch of us up, and literally all over the world today. And so missions has always been at the forefront of my heart. Went to Canadian Bible College in Regina, and every Friday night it would be missions night, and the school was really good with bringing in different missionaries to speak to us, to challenge us, to let us know what was going on. It was interesting during that time, and that whole time, I've never felt God's call to full-time missionary work. It was full-time ministry, but not overseas, and I've often wondered about that. But it's just the way God has called me in my ministry. I went to Sweden and stayed in Europe for 10 months. I was studying over there. In those 10 months, I had the opportunity of staying with some missionaries as well and being exposed to different mission opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so there's always been this missions kind of work in the background of everything that I've been exposed to. And when I got into ministry, I began to try to figure out how could I do a short-term missions trip. And God never put it together for me right away. It took me 16 years before I actually did my first short-term missions trip. But in that time, He continued to put on my heart the passion for missions and just the importance of missions. And I think back now and I see how God was shaping and molding me and preparing me for the experience I've had at West London Alliance.
You've mentioned you've done several trips over the last few years.
Yes.
Just describe a little bit of what that has looked like, where they've been, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So it started in 2006. I went to Serbia and was there for a week. This was my first trip, mm-hmm. and to be quite honest, scared to death to lead a team. Mm-hmm. What am I doing? I know we're going to be with this great missionary couple in Serbia, mm-hmm. but I'm looking at a group around me, and they're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to go, and I'm like, great, this is great, but I was scared to lead this team.
Wow. Mm.
And so that was the first one. Followed that up in 2008, mm-hmm. went back to Serbia.
Same place?
Same place,
okay.
Same missionaries. Okay. We did a youth camp, mm-hmm. and we did a children's camp. So that was a 2-week adventure, and I led 2 different teams. So that was the second adventure. The third one was in 2011, mm-hmm. and that was to Poland. Mm-hmm. And again, it was working with a church, did a little bit of construction, did a VBS, worked with some missionaries over there. 2013 was to Cambodia, and that was an ESL camp, and that was for a week. And
just so our listeners, in case they don't know what ESL is,
mm-hmm.
what's ESL?
English as a second language.
Okay.
And so that was a week, and then my latest trip was just a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. That was to the Bahamas, mm-hmm. and that was a variety of ministries. I formed the team again to take 2 teams. One was a work team. Mm-hmm. And so there was construction to do down there and a few other things. The other team was a ministry team. Mm-hmm. So we had an opportunity to go to an HIV camp, to go to a soup kitchen, to work with a children's hostel, to go to a Haitian church in the Bahamas, mm-hmm. and put on a program for the kids there. So a wide variety of activities that we did there. So those are the 5-6 trips I've taken, mm-hmm. and over the span of 9 years.
Well, let me ask you about some of the logistics here. One of the things we hope for this podcast is it's got practical ideas for people who are in a church. Perhaps it's a Canadian church. In our case, it's a medium-sized church interested in doing global missions. First of all, when you think about deciding on the mission trip itself, the place that you're going, the type of ministry you're going to do, describe a little bit of your thinking process early in the preparation phase.
Well, as you know, with the Alliance, mm-hmm. We have something called the 4 S's. Mm-hmm. And so it's the way that we have split up the world geographically. So we have Asian spice, mm-hmm. Silk Road, desert sand, Caribbean sun. So I took those 4 S's, mm-hmm. and said I would like to take a team to each one of those S's over the next 8 years, every 2 years. Mm-hmm. So when I'm picking out a destination, I was very much motivated by the structure that the Alliance has set out, mm-hmm. for us. But that's just one of the the characteristics of picking a location. I'm also looking at the longevity of the missionary. How long has the missionary been there? We have a couple in our church who are over in the Asian Spice region, and this is their first term of being over in Asia. I know they would have gladly welcomed a team from our church, but probably it's not the best time to go when they just get fresh on the field. Probably not the best thing to do to them, because it is a lot of work for the missionary as well. So I'm looking for a little bit of longevity. Another thing that I'm looking for is what do they want us to do? We've done camps, we've done ESL, we've done building projects, we've done a variety of HIV camps, hostels, just some different things like that. So I'm looking at what does a missionary have for us to do? How's it going to fit in with what I see as could be a great opportunity for our people to go and minister? Another thing that I'm looking for is, and this is just practically, is just timing on the calendar. Is when the missionary wants us to come, is that when it's going to work best for us? Most of all, I really want us to go where God wants us to go, and when He wants us to go, and what He wants us to do. And that is just praying over things. My next scheduled trip is 2017. I'm already praying about, God, where do you want us to go? Where do you want me to take this next team? I have some possibilities. I have some great options. But I'm just waiting to see how God opens up the door. And I think when it comes right down to it, that has to be the primary characteristic of the location you choose, is let God lead the way.
What I hear you saying then is it's a combination of your deliberate planning and prayerful dependence on God's leading as you plan.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your interaction between short-term missions and long-term missions. You've got a short-term team, but in each case now you've mentioned a worker or a missionary who is already there. Just talk a little bit about the interaction of short-term and long-term ministry and how you see those fitting together from your point of view.
As I've gotten to know the missionaries more and more and worked with them a little bit closer on bringing teams, I see that the two are really intertwined. If you ask me if one can exist without the other, I would say yes and no, because I feel that the missionaries have an opportunity of bringing a team in that can really help in advancing their ministry. For instance, the Cambodia trip we went on, the missionary there, he wants the short-term mission teams to come because he said to us, if you guys don't come over from North America and I put this on my own, I got about 20 kids that are going to show up. He says, you guys are the draw. You guys are the ones that are pulling. So you guys are coming from North America. That's why I have 130 kids coming.
So the interest is expanded because of your presence there.
Yeah.
And yet it's undergirded by whatever the strategy on the field is.
I really feel that there's a great collaboration between a church and a team coming over and a missionary that's been there for a long time.
Yeah. Well, as you talk about your team, let me ask about how you go about picking the members of the team.
So I have an informational meeting and I present the missions package. Where are we going? What are we doing? When are we going? How much is it going to cost? And highlight who the missionary couple are that we're going to be working with, give them as much information as I possibly can. I also have an application form in there. And I give one to everybody. And what I do, Megs, is I just let God decide who's going to go. Now, some of it is determined by how many people the missionary can handle. And you have to be sensitive to that, because some are saying, we can only handle 6 or 7 people at one time. This last trip we went on, they could have handled 90 people. I took 22. So
Wow.
it just depends on what their needs are. So I really let God figure that out for me. I thankfully have never had to say to anyone, sorry, you can't go on this trip.
I see. Okay.
So I'm very thankful for that. But that is the process that I've been blessed with so far.
Are there any particular attitudes or characteristics that you're watching for generally? You've never had to say, no, I appreciate that, but
Yeah.
anything in particular that you're looking for?
There's a few things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for excitement.
Okay.
And this is in no particular order.
Okay.
So I'm looking for excitement. And a lot of times, and I don't mean to stereotype here, but a lot of times the wife is very excited and they're kind of dragging the husband along.
Okay.
Well, I want to see excitement from the husband as well. I want to know you want to go because you're excited to go, not because your wife is dragging you along to do this. I'm looking for ownership, that this is their trip. This is their experience. And so I want to see that come out. I'm looking for humility in people, open to doing tasks that they normally wouldn't do, and try to explain as much as I can, this is what we're going to be doing. Very interesting, this last trip that we took to the Bahamas with going to the HIV camp, a lot of our people were a little bit nervous about that.
Mm-hmm. Understandably.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I wanted to see that they would be humble in following my leadership in taking them to that. So I'm looking for humility. I'm looking for submission. Submission to God and what He would have for their life. Submission to the leadership on the field. And submission to me as their leader. I give them a chain of command. When we get into the training of it, I say, this is how things are set up. And I say to them, I'm the guy in charge. You have to lay that out. You have to lay that out right away. Because if you don't, you're going to run into some big problems on the field. Because they have to understand that what the leader says goes. And the leader's working with the missionaries all the time to really direct the team.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for that submission. I'm looking for, and I really preach flexibility. They need to be flexible. And I say that at almost every meeting because there's going to be issues that come up, and we were supposed to go to point A, but today we have to go to point B.
Right.
And you just got to let it flow. Or you get to point A, and things aren't what they were supposed to be. And so some people can freak out over that, but I'm like, we have to be flexible. So those are
It's very good.
some of the attitudes, characteristics that you need to be looking for.
Yeah, it's excellent.
And you need to be training your people to do that, to have those attitudes and characteristics.
Let me ask you about the team building that you do
Yeah.
once you've selected your team, and then you've got at least a few weeks or a few months until you depart. What does that time window often look like? Is there any normal average?
Every missions trip has been a little bit different,
Sure.
but I try to have anywhere from 6 to 10 months.
Okay. So 6 to 10 months, you've got your group selected. And what does that period of time look like then?
Yeah. The team building is really the key to a successful missions trip. You can have a great location, and you can have great missionaries to go to, and you can have great stuff to do. But if you don't have unity on your team, you're in big trouble. So I can't emphasize this enough. This is key. And as I said, I set out anywhere from 6 to 10 months ahead of time team meetings. I want to give time for each team member to get to know each team member. You have to meet at least once a month. At those meetings, you want to get everybody to have written out their testimony and begin sharing those. If there's one thing that's going to build a team, it's people sharing their testimony with each other, because that is where people really get to know each other. And I have found that has been invaluable for getting that team unity and building them together. So have one or two people share their testimonies with each other. Pray for each other. Make sure you have time praying for each other, for what's ahead. for all the concerns and any fears that people may have. Just pray about those, and that really helps. Talk about those fears and talk about those concerns and talk about how they react under stress. Because if there's a stressful situation and you don't know how people are going to react, you can be really taken off guard. And so to me, it's very important that you know at least a little glimpse of how people are going to react under stress and under some very tiring circumstances as well.
Yeah.
When we're in Cambodia, you have the time change, you have the heat, and you have long days. That made for some of us being pretty tired. Some of us were cranky. Some of us wanted to be left alone. Some of us needed some downtime. But we knew that ahead of time. And so that really helped the team go, they just need some time by themselves. Or, I'm really tired, I just need to go to bed. You know, it really helped with building that team. But you have to give the opportunity for your team to talk about that.
Yeah. It sounds to me that really, I appreciate there's some specifics right at the end of what you've said, but really you're encouraging great Christian community.
Yes.
Sharing your testimony.
Yes.
Praying for each other, understanding each other. Caring for one another. You're actually building the community of West London Alliance through this means of doing a short-term work as well. Okay, one more question on the preparation phase. You're the leader, together with Julie. You cooperated to lead, at least at times. She wasn't on all the trips, I understand. But
all but one.
All but one.
Yeah.
What did you do to prepare yourself to be a leader of the short-term team?
There's a couple things. First of all, I really prayed a lot. I mean, that just goes without saying, but you have to say it. I mean, you have to pray a lot. That God is going to give you the strength and the wisdom and the ability to be able to lead this team. Because, you know, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. And that is what is the key in my mind. You have to be in a good spiritual, can I say, zone with God to do this. And I don't mean to boast about anything, but you have to. Because if you're going with just kind of winging it and hoping on a hope and a prayer, you're going to, like, seriously, you're going to have trouble. Like, you have to take some time and really, really pray about it.
Well, that seems to me connected to what you said about humility. You're a leader, that's true, but you're in a humble space, an appropriate space before God. He's really in control.
Yeah.
He's the one that will enable it.
Oh, yeah. And recognize it quickly and early. The other thing, too, is you have to prepare yourself physically. The last trip I went to was there was no time change, no time zone change, which was really nice. But the trip before that to Cambodia was taxing. And you've been overseas. You know what that trip's like. And some of you listening, you may have done that as well. You know how taxing that is. And so you really need to make sure that physically you're well prepared. And whatever that looks like, however you do that in your life, it doesn't matter whether there's a time change or not. The trip itself is hard on you, and it's taxing because you are leading a team, and you have to be on your game. And if things are going to go a little bit haywire in some cases, then you got to know this is what I need to do. The other thing too is, even while you're there, make sure that you are getting adequate sleep. And one other thing that Julie and I did was take a workshop that really set us up well for this trip. And it was actually put on by your organization, SEND. And it was called Short-Term Leader Training. They give a great manual. And let me say, I used that as a great resource for this last trip that I went on. But anything that you can expose yourself to as far as getting yourself trained to do this. And there's, like I said, there's lots of good stuff out there. And, just get as knowledgeable as you can.
Okay, so let's look toward the end of a trip now. You've carried on your ministry. You've had an experience together as a group, whether it's somewhere between 6 and 22 people. How do you go about debriefing your team?
You know, this is one of the key things that you have to do as a leader, is you can't let this experience go by without debriefing. Because people, and I say this in the best way, after a missions trip, they're a little bit messed up. They've come out of the North American culture. They've experienced something that, for many of them, they haven't seen before. This last team that I took, there was a lot of them that had never been on a missions trip ever before. And so a lot of them were like, wow, how do I just digest all this? And how do I filter it through? So there's 3 things that I do for debriefing. Number 1 is I actually do a very short debriefing on the field while I'm there. And I just give them a couple questions. I talk to them about what it's going to be like when we get home. I leave that on the field. I give them a piece of paper that they can take and fill out on their own with God. Second thing is plan to have your debrief meeting with your team. Plan that before you leave. Try to get the date nailed down. Doesn't always work, but try to get that nailed down before you leave so that everybody knows on such and such a date, this is when we need to meet. And that's the big group thing. And that's a lot of fun. And that's where this last one that I did, we talked about getting there and we talked about coming home and just kind of went through a series of questions that I had, but everybody could hear everybody's answers. And that is key, because some people are going, yeah, that's exactly how I felt, or yeah, you felt that too. And it's really important for the team members to hear that they're not alone in what they felt and what they experienced. Third thing is personal evaluation. So I have people fill out this last one was about a 10-question questionnaire. And
so it's and they spend time on their own doing that, or as a couple?
On their own.
On their own.
Yeah.
Okay.
If a couple go, I want each of them to fill it out.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I do for debriefing. So those 3.
Excellent. How do you know if it's been successful or not? How do you evaluate whether it was worth it?
Well, you can't get your head swelled when the team members go, that was such a great trip, thank you. Because you're going to hear that.
It's encouraging, though.
Well, it is encouraging.
Sure.
But that can go to your head and go, well, I guess we had a successful trip. Is that what really is what a successful trip is all about? No. I look at it and go, it's successful if the people start talking about what changes God is doing in their life because of it. It's not about what you did. It's not about how long you went or how great the missionaries were. Not to say that isn't important, but it's about what God did in their hearts and minds of those who went and how he changed them. And that, to me, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, that was successful.
If there are associate pastors like you out there, or perhaps somebody in a missions committee, or someone who's in a church and leading, and they're thinking about doing an adult trip like this, and they'd like to bounce some ideas around, where could they find you to touch base with you?
Well, I think the best place would be just to email me. So it's Lyall, Lyall, at wlachurch.org.
We hope you found today's interview to be both informative and inspiring. If you missed anything or would like to check out the resources or links mentioned during the interview, you can find the show notes we've prepared at our website, globalmissionspodcast.com. You can also use the website or our Facebook page to suggest a particular topic or expert you'd like to hear featured on this program. The Global Missions Podcast is co-sponsored by the Jaffrey Centre for Global Initiatives and Send International of Canada. Thanks for listening in. I'm your host, Mags, and I invite you to join us again in 2 weeks when we'll continue to explore this grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.